Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time I'm taking a question or a comment from the previous video, the one about inconsistencies between the prequels and the original trilogy, and as I predicted, a lot of people took exception to that video or came to the defense of the prequels and OT and said why it makes sense, and I very much appreciate the passion. I very much appreciate your stance. I'm not trying to anger you anymore. But I thought I would respond to at least one of the comments here and respond or rebuttal some of the points they bring up, as well as bring up another point that I think people are going to be frustrated with. I don't know. But anyway, this comment came to us from the Clone Ren, who said, and I'm going to break it up into pieces and respond to it that way, but they started out by saying, "Hey Thor, that's not a plot hole. Why Mon Mothma would educate Luke. She can say how they look like, how kind and good they were, and that's it. She cannot educate him about the Force. The only thing that she can teach him is about the politics of that time. She knows Kanan and Ezra, and then Kanan is dead and Ezra disappears." Okay, so first of all, I didn't in any way say Mon Mothma could educate Luke on the Force. What I was saying in that video is that Mon Mothma would know quite a bit about the Jedi. She would know Yoda, for example. There is a chance she even met Yoda at some point, or passed him in the hallway, or something like that. But she would very much, as a senator during the Clone Wars, she would know who the leader of the generals was. She would know the leader of the Jedi. She would know the name Yoda, even if she knew little to nothing else about him. And you bring up Kanan and Ezra and how they were Jedi fighting for the Republic, and I'm sure the appearance of Jedi in the early rebellion was an inspiring thing. It was a motivating thing. People were probably excited to have the Jedi back on their side, and then as you point out, one dies, one disappears. A little bit later, another one shows up. Luke shows up and blows up the Death Star. He no doubt brought a ton of hope back to the galaxy and the rebellion. And if you are Mon Mothma, if you are the leader of the rebellion, you are going to seek out Luke and probably have a chat with him, right? And you're going to find out he doesn't know a damn thing about the Jedi other than what Obi-Wan, who she would also remember from the Clone Wars almost undoubtedly, he doesn't know anything about them. He grew up on Tatooine, he grew up isolated and just doesn't know anything. So if you are Mon Mothma and you have this new hero, this new Jedi, you're going to help him any way you possibly could. You're going to tell him what you know. You're going to direct him to others who probably know more about the Clone Wars and about the Jedi than you do as well. I'm sure she can find somebody either within the rebellion or that she remembers from back in the day. I mean, she knows a Luthen, right? Leia is still on the rebellion as far as we know. She would probably have a lot of information about the history of the Jedi Order, I'm assuming. And that's if we take Andor into account, which we're only talking about the prequels and OT here, so let's just subtract that one. But certainly she herself would know a lot about the Jedi just in general, and that she could direct him to other people who know a lot more than she does about the Jedi. That was simply the point I was trying to make, that Luke would have heard of Yoda before The Empire Strikes Back rolled around. That in the 3 years between those two movies, he would have learned quite a bit about the Jedi from numerous sources. Alright, your comment then goes on to say Rex is similar. He can say stories, and that's, again, it. Alright, so I didn't really bring up Rex in the video. I kind of mentioned him in passing because I wanted to keep it between the prequels and the original trilogy, and that is from the Clone Wars, obviously. But if we do bring Rex into the picture, he can do more than tell stories. He can tell stories about Anakin Skywalker. He can tell, like, every story about Anakin Skywalker during the Clone Wars. I'm sure he remembers. I'm sure he remembers much about the military structure at the time as well. He could tell them all sorts. He could tell Luke all sorts of things about the Jedi Order and how they operated and how the whole thing operated, how the Clone Wars went. He is an absolute wealth of knowledge for Luke. Just telling him the things Anakin was able to do allows Luke to begin to understand what he might be able to do as also a Jedi. Rex being in the rebellion throws a wrench into the whole damn thing, and being confirmed to have been at Endor, which means he was almost certainly on the shuttle with Luke Skywalker for a time on their way to Endor, especially if he is the character Nick Sant, if that has been retconned, which I think it officially has at this point, I'm not sure. But even then, he could have just been like, hey, I knew a guy named Anakin Skywalker, and Luke had been like, oh my god, that was my father, and well, they're off to the races and having a bunch of discussions. But I mean, that's well after the fact. But even still, going back to the Mon Mothma thing, she would have no doubt directed Luke to Rex if he is in the rebellion. She would have known he was the captain or commander for Anakin Skywalker. That is the perfect guy for him to talk to, or any other clone trooper of any rank that might be in the rebellion who may have personally interacted with Jedi. Either way, let's move on. And next you said, people don't remember the wars in 20 years. Of course they will not know the Jedi. They become a legend or a simple story that they betrayed Palpatine, or they will forget about them. And no, people don't forget wars in 20 years. I mean, maybe some people do. Of course, some people just put it in the past and never think about it or never educate themselves to begin with, and that's fine. But a lot of people do. And I think the irony here is, and I pointed it out in that first video, is that the prequels are now 20 years old, and here we are debating the hell out of them because we all know them so damn well. Same goes for the original trilogy, which is now over 40 years old, and yet we all know that movies or those movies so damn well, despite how long ago they are, because we decided to learn about them and rewatch them and educate ourselves about them. And there would be people, again, probably within the rebellion, who had educated themselves on the Clone Wars, who had educated themselves on the Jedi, who may have been fascinated by them. And it's not just the Clone Wars, right? The Jedi have 25,000 years of history, 1,000 with the current or the Republic of the time or during the time of the prequels. So even if the average person doesn't remember the war 20 years ago, which some people wouldn't, certainly, there are a lot who would remember it, who would have made a point of remembering it, who would have studied it, who would have all sorts of knowledge, again, to share with Luke that the Empire could not have erased. They can get rid of information that is stored somewhere, sure, but they cannot erase the information that is going to be in the mind of a lot of people across the galaxy. And Luke would certainly be able to find at least one expert in the Clone Wars and the Jedi, or the Jedi. Alright, moving on. Do you know any general from the Iraq War, for example? And are you talking about the first one? Are you talking about Desert Storm back in the 90s when I was in grade school? Because I can remember Stormin Norman Schwarzkopf. I can remember Colin Powell. They were all over the television. We discussed them in social studies class. There were even Desert Storm trading cards. I never bought them. I remember them existing. I won't say I remember a ton about the war. I mean, it lasted like a month or something like that anyway, but I remember a lot about it. If somebody were asking me questions, I would probably be able to trigger my memory and be like, oh yeah, I remember that, I remember that. I would probably be able to help somebody know the basics of that war, even though I was very young and I didn't really, quote unquote, care about it. It is not something I've studied since or know a ton about back then. But I would still know the basics after all this time, after 30 plus years. I still know the basics of that war. And again, there would be people who studied it who remember a hell of a lot more than me. Alright, they then go on to say, this is so simple, they will forget about Grievous and Count Dooku too, only few people will remember them. And to that I will say the names Hitler and Rommel, and I'm guessing a lot of people watching this now know those names and will never forget those names, and that history will never forget those names, and that many years from now you can say them, and a lot of people, maybe not a lot, but plenty of people, especially one of those two, are going to know them, the same way history would not soon forget in the Star Wars galaxy Grievous and Count Dooku, the leaders of the side of a galaxy-spanning war that saw billions of people die. This one I really can't agree with or see your point, because there's no way those names are going to be forgotten anytime soon. Many people are going to remember them. They are going down in history. They are going to stain history with what they have done, especially after the fact when we learned that the Clone Wars was all a manufactured thing. Palpatine's name would be another one never forgotten in history. In fact, he is probably the Hitler of the time, let's be real. So I don't agree that people are going to forget all these things, all these names, especially after only 20 years. And back to the comment now. Maybe they will know that they were bad just like the Jedi, but again, not the entire galaxy. Do you remember the people who saved countries recently? Even from World War II, most of the people don't know a single general. And, well, I did mention one a moment ago with Rommel, and I can remember Patton, Eisenhower, Bradley, Montgomery, and that's probably the only ones I can rattle off the top of my head, to be completely honest and fair here. But that's not bad, I would say, for a war I certainly was not alive for, and one I have never studied in detail. I mean, I learned about it in school, I've learned about it here and there over the years, because it's interesting to learn about World War II, because obviously it's a grand scale war that engulfed pretty much our entire planet. So yeah, I do want to know what happened, and how it happened, and why it happened, and all that sort of thing. But anyway, my point is, I'm just kind of an average guy, and I know things about World War II from 80 years ago at this point. I'm just saying that if you're Luke Skywalker in the Star Wars galaxy, there are going to be people you could seek out to learn all kinds of information about the Jedi and the Clone Wars, and you would certainly have heard of Yoda. you would not be surprised to find out he is a little green guy. Now, I'm not saying the movies are bad. I'm not saying I dislike the prequels. I love the prequels. I love the OT. And I think part of the reason why this has never really bothered me is because when I watched the prequels, I was in my early 20s. And yeah, 20 years ago, when you're 20 years old, well, it's your life. And now I'm older. And I can look back 20 years ago and say, wow, I was 27 20 years ago, and now I'm not anymore. And 20 years from now is probably going to go in the snap of a fingers, and I'll be 67. And basically what I'm saying is 20 years is not a long time. People do not forget things in 20 years. And another potential problem here for Luke is Leia, or how much Leia would probably know about the Jedi and the Clone Wars, considering who her real parents were and considering who her adoptive parents were. I mean, you don't think Bail Organa told her anything about the Jedi? He knew who she was. He knew there was a chance that maybe someday Obi-Wan or Yoda could come around and say, hey, we need to train her. She's the only hope we have left. And Bail didn't seem to have any ill will towards the Jedi, and I'm not just talking in the Kenobi series when he immediately goes to Obi-Wan to try to help save Leia. I'm talking about in A New Hope. He sent Leia to Obi-Wan. I mean, that didn't seem like a guy who didn't want her knowing about the Jedi at all, and probably had taught her a thing or two about Obi-Wan and about the Clone Wars and about the Jedi and how they weren't the bad guys. So that is another pretty big plot hole in my opinion. I think Leia would know a great deal about the Jedi in all reality. Enough to give, again, a general education to Luke. She's not teaching him how to use the Force or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is the information about the Jedi and the Clone Wars is going to be prevalent. Whether or not the Empire did everything possible they could to erase it, you cannot erase the minds of everybody. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people out there who wouldn't talk about it, who have learned that, oh, we don't mention the Jedi, we just forget about them, and we talk ill of them if we talk about them at all in public. And I'm sure there are also people who really believed the propaganda and believed that they were evil and that they tried to kill Palpatine and take over the galaxy. Yes, there are a lot of people who either didn't know, didn't care, or had turned. But there are also a lot of people who probably always believed in the Jedi, who knew their history, who knew this kind of sounds fishy that they just turned on the Republic after 25,000 years and tried to take over, and then the Republic becomes this evil empire. It's almost like we can't trust Palpatine. Anyway, again, all I'm saying is there's tons of information about the Jedi and the Clone Wars out there that Luke could have easily found if he wanted to, and he had 3 years between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back to learn about Yoda, and somehow never did. I don't know. I love the movies. I love both the prequels and the original trilogy. I'm fine with it. I accept it. But it doesn't make a ton of sense, and I think it's fun to discuss in a friendly manner. Hopefully this video has been done in a friendly manner. I don't mean any ill will or trying to attack the original poster. I appreciate the comment. I really do. And I hope you watched and appreciated the video and my responses here. But either way, that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn. Take to the comments below and tell me what you have to say about this one. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you see my points? Do you want to counter them? Or ask a question for a future lightning response video when we put this topic in the rearview mirror. Whatever the case may be though, leave a comment below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.